Hello, good evening everybody. Thanks for coming along tonight to another Male Psychology Network lecture. The Male Psychology Network, as some of you will know, has recently expanded and grown to become, to have an offshoot, the Male Psychology section of the British Psychological Society. So we're hoping that all the good things that have been coming from the Male Psychology Network are going to be coming amplified through the section. And obviously what we're interested in mainly is a lot of the issues that are facing men and boys in terms of mental health issues. I think all know about the high rates of male suicide and the high rates of substance abuse, the levels of incarceration of men, which may be related to mental health issues too. Little of this is investigated in mainstream psychology, unfortunately, so what we're hoping to do is shed some light on what's really happening. Now, one of the areas that you hear very little about is the area of false accusations of sexual abuse against men, and it happens against women too, but more so against men. Now, personally speaking, I can only imagine the horror and trauma that would be involved in being accused of something that I think almost all men consider a kind of sick and horrible thing to do. I don't think any men are kind of respecting of sex crimes by other men. And so the shame and stress that is associated with being falsely accused of something like that is it's the kind of thing that I'm looking forward to hearing about tonight, because it's the kind of thing that in none of my training or none of the lectures that I've been to as a psychologist have I come across this topic before. So I think it's a very important thing that whatever you're learning here tonight, do pass it on to others who you think might be interested, professional psychologists, carers, therapists of any kind, anybody who you think might be interested in this topic, because it's so important. Now, we're very lucky to have somebody who's been working right at the very center of trying to help men who are going through these sorts of issues. And in some ways, what you're going to find tonight is that Margaret Gardner is somebody who's spearheading something that's not necessarily the most popular of topics ever. Like it's not everyone's favorite charity or anything like that. And so it's something that's not funded, it's not recognized but very widely, but I think nonetheless is a hugely important work. And Margaret herself has got a kind of a rich history of kind of personal experiences, and started off as an emergency nurse, which obviously will have exposed you to a lot of the traumatic things that happen in a human life. Has worked abroad, lived abroad, and I think a lot of these experiences have probably helped you to become the kind of person who's grounded enough to be able to cope with the kind of stories that you hear, and be able to help people in a kind of an empathic sort of way. And you can tell us about your own experiences, perhaps too, of all of these different things. So, without me going on any further, I'd like you to put your hands together, give a very warm welcome to Margaret Gardner. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. Can you all hear me? I know how bad it can be sometimes. Well, I'm no psychologist, unfortunately. I just sit, John has just told you, and you can read it there, about my background. So being a nurse of different descriptions, especially an emergency nurse, I am able to deal with the helpline for whoever phones up with whatever problem of false allegations of a sexual nature. And of course, we deal with child protection issues as well. But here, we won't talk too much about the child protection issues. We'll just talk about the sex allegations. To just give you an overall picture of what we deal with, we've got our helpline, which is not funded, and so people call us knowing that it's expensive to call us, and it's the only way for them to have actual information to try and put them on the path of what is happening now and what the next steps are. We make sure that they only get factual information. It's both male and female. It's parents that phone, it's girlfriends, it's wives, and adult children. And occasionally I've had a youngster phone us. Firstly, people they may not know they're being investigated by the police. And the first thing that they find out is they're either arrested at work or in the work at home. But before I do that, I want to put you in the place of somebody that is possibly going to be falsely accused. Now just think what that means. And as I read this, I'm sorry, it's the only bit I'm going to read, well, apart from some stories that are anonymous. Have you ever considered the possibility that you are arrested in your own home, in front of your family and full view of your friends and neighbours, held in a police cell, interviewed under caution, charged and bailed when you haven't done anything? Have you ever considered the possibility that your photograph, name, and address might appear in the local national press and on TV, insinuating what an evil monster you are when you haven't done anything? Have you ever considered the possibility that having been released without charge or with all charges dropped, with your good name and integrity still in place in the eyes of the law, you might be subjected to additional investigation by the social services and other agencies where you may have no right of representation when you haven't done anything? Have you ever considered the possibility that social services could force you to break off contact with your family and children when you haven't done anything? Have you ever considered the possibility that without proof, evidence, witnesses, or corroboration, you could be convicted and sentenced to several years in prison when you haven't done anything? Now, from your perspective, put yourself in that position. Because what usually happens is the police either ask you to come in for an interview, or they turn up at your door with several people and take you in for an interview. It could be under caution, or it could be a voluntary. To be honest, they're both the same thing, because you are interviewed on tape. Then there are two ways that you are told you're either on bail or they'll get back to you. Now, the on bail bit has only recently come in. It's supposed to try and keep the police in dealing with the issues within 28 days. But unfortunately, that 28 days can then, with the signature of a higher officer, go on for another 28, then another 28, and then finally to the court. Now, one of our callers said, even though it went to court, the court said, you can't have him on bail anymore. So they just dropped the bail and just had him, we'll get back to you. Once that's happened, the police will then do their investigation, decide whether they've got enough evidence, and then pass it up to the CPS. The CPS is the people that look at that investigation and decide whether you're going to be charged or whether you're not. Then, if you're going to be if they're going to drop the case, you then go about your business. Then, if you're going to be charged, you go to the magistrate's court, for the magistrate to make sure all the evidence is together, ready for a Crown Court appeal visit. Then a Crown Court visit is made. Now, once they've gone to the Crown Court, you have solicitors. Now, you've heard about legal aid, haven't you? Now, it depends on how much, if you get legal aid, the legal aid solicitors have not got the funding to be able to do an investigation into your crime at all and get your evidence. Whereas if you decide to have pay a solicitor privately, you will get a better service only because they have got the funds to be able to go out and, for instance, get a private detective to do this, that, or the other, or any other type, a psychologist to check on this. Then it's the jury's turn. Once the two barristers have had their arguments in court, it's the jury's turn then to decide who is guilty and who is innocent. The one problem with that is they don't get to hear the whole story, because your full story does not go into court. There are only elements of it because the courts say you can't use especially bad character evidence for the accuser. But you can use bad character evidence for the accused. So that's the dilemma for the jury. They don't hear a full sentence, full information. Then the judge is there to sum up both cases, and when he's summed it up, the jury make the decision. Now, it could be not guilty, and they go back into society. I'll talk about that later. Or they go into prison. And going into prison is quite hard. Now, remember, you're thinking, well, what the hell would I feel like in this position? I've just been accused. I've just been found guilty. So how am I going to feel? Then they go into prison and they suffer, because they maintain their innocence, they suffer quite a lot of problems from the prison service, because the prison service has to take it that they've been found guilty, so they are guilty. Now, they will not recognise the fact people are falsely accused. And so they go through their prison sentence, they come out the other end, and still the organisations, because they've been found guilty, treat them as guilty. And they come into society, they're monitored for a certain period, and then they're left relatively to themselves. But they can't go home necessarily. Now, just think, going through all that, how is it going to affect you? Well, when they come to our helpline, the first thing they do is practically break down. They talk to us, because there's myself and two other people on the helpline, because we cannot get the volunteers that are in the right frame of mind to be able to help with the helpline. And so they come to us asking for advice, often crying, and asking to be referred to psychologists, well, often asking to be referred for their nerves, for how they're feeling. But we have nobody. They've only got us to listen to, because at least we believe them. We can suggest they go to their local GP, but because of the trauma of this type of crime, the GPs can't necessarily do much. They can refer them to their counsellors. We've got a national-wide counsel service that we refer them to as well. And then we've got my mobile, because for the ones that cannot get over that initial problem of being really wanting to commit suicide or are so stressed, they can phone me anytime, day and night, on the mobile. It helps them. But then we tell them how to go about doing things. We also provide a couple of solicitors' names for the nearest area they're in. Now, we only give a couple because I've had problems in the past where I've just given names and names and names, and people are just going around in a circle asking solicitors what to do. You know, oh, I don't like him, so I'll have a go with him. So what we do is give them 2 solicitors for them to go to. Now, the thing is, people don't often come back to say how they're getting on. Only the ones that are really down and use my mobile. But occasionally we get families coming back and saying, thank God you were there. He can at least talk to us now. Because that's one of the things. I'm saying he, but we have got she's as well. So excuse me for using the male term. It's easier for me. So the families come to us and say, I can't talk to him. He won't talk to us. He's scrunched up. He's in his room. He won't come out. He's terrified of going out because he's expecting to be attacked. Because the other thing is the press. I haven't mentioned them. Even though they might not be nationwide, often people in the press talk about those accused locally. And it is horrendous because it's not the individual only that's getting publicised. It's their family, it's their children. And one of my colleagues back in Wales, her father was accused, and her child, a teenager boy, was found hanging, and they found him just in time. And the daughter was in the same class as the accused mother, as the accuser, the mother of the accuser, and she had problems then. She was a bright young girl. She had problems, and she had to move schools. And trying to move children between schools, for whatever reason, is extremely difficult. So they've had a huge trauma there. But the son is fortunately coming round, but the families are fighting for their loved one in prison because nobody tells them how to fight a false allegation. We're the only ones that can provide that information, and we do that in a leaflet form. Have any of you heard of the CCRC? Just one of you. Yes, because the CCRC is where, if you're going for an appeal, and that's the people in prison, well, actually, the people that have come out of prison can also appeal. Your information goes up to them, and they decide whether your conviction can be overturned. And that is another ball game. I'll go back to when people are on bail. I've got people on bail for 2 years, and the police don't talk to them. They don't. Their solicitors, they won't tell their solicitors anything. They have got no time scale to complete an investigation. And this is why so many are so destroyed at the beginning by going through that system. Now, if they get the charges dropped, do you think they're going to be okay? No. You get people saying, oh, great, it's dropped. You can get on with your life now. Like heck, you can't. Because I've got them coming back years after. Something's been said in the media, and they're back to the beginning. They're back to their trauma. And most of them get PTSD. And it is, you normally think of PTSD with soldiers, male and female. But it also is with this. Even with my helpers, my voluntary people, I say mine, it's not mine, FASO helpers and volunteers, most of them have had either themselves or family go through it. And that's the sort of person we need, because unless you've been there, you have no idea whatsoever what the pressures are on you. Can I just read you a couple of things that people have written to me? And I won't go through the whole thing, but I think I've just taken you, I'll go for the first one. This is a young man, and it's starting off with him being accused, being kept, not on bail because he was put into prison on a temporary measure, and then going through the whole system. He's out now. He's on, and he's under the protection, public protection. And this is the sort, I've just taken out his words of the stress that he went through. When he was arrested, he couldn't believe it. It was a very stressful time. I felt confused and angry. This is their words, remember, that's why I'm reading it. There's nothing you can do but cry your heart out. I witnessed assault and abuse on others when he was on remand. He was threatened himself quite a few times, and this, I'm afraid, is what I've got off others. But when he was found guilty in court, the staff tried to keep him calm because he was so distressed. He was numb. He then was put in prison with a person with huge psychological problems. And whilst he was there, he still suffered threats and abuse. He then went to work and promoted to a technician. And again, while he was there, he witnessed assault. Now remember, you're in this position. What would you think? One was quite brutal and unwarranted. I had to give a statement to appear in court, but fortunately, he then admitted it, so he didn't have to go. He did share a cell with a person that he really got on with. But that person, after 6 months, he supported him while he was dying. And he still hasn't got over that. That's part of his PTSD, because he got on really well with him. After being in prison for 2 years, he really started getting depressed. And this affected his physical health and his skin. His skin started to turn yellow. And then somebody encouraged him to do distance learning, and he took it up. And distance learning changed his life. And now he was able to see outside the box and into the future that he wanted for himself. But the threats and the abuse were still always with him. He was indecently assaulted, and when he reported it to staff, they just laughed at him. When he went to the parole board, this is where you get examined to see if you're safe to come back in society. And with that, nowadays, you are also, you have a lie detector test. But that's the only time that the prison service will allow a lie detector test when you come out to society. They won't do it at the beginning when you are being investigated. 18 months after the first refusal, he was able to come out 18 months after that on his second hearing, but he still had to wait 4 months. He then was sent 250 miles away, and he didn't think it was too bad, but the PTSD, the threats of the abuse, was still with him, and he was still suffering from that. But there was nobody there to give him any mental help. In fact, it wasn't diagnosed because they don't seem to diagnose it in prison. And he hadn't been, because he was only temporary there, he hadn't been to a doctor. His life started getting better, and he was sent to a bedsit. And in that bedsit, he was there for 7 months, settling down nicely. And then suddenly, he was moved as an emergency because somebody had recognized him in the town, and it was all over Facebook. So with this PTSD he's got, well, sorry, I'm not a psychologist, but this is what he has now been psychology, sorry. He's now been assessed as with PTSD. But with his being so upset, it's a wonder. He was then moved away. He was away again, a long journey on his own in a train. He went to accommodation that was that the parole had given him. Then he came back to another part of where he lived. And at the moment, he's now living in a flat, nice and cozy, single flat. He's trying to get his act together, and he did all those courses, so he's got a plethora of academic courses, and so he's trying to get jobs, and unfortunately it's very difficult because he's got this prison sentence on his DBS, and because of that there are lots of jobs that cannot take you. Also, his PPU, Public Protection Officer unit, have to agree what he can do. So he's limited, but he's trying to keep his strength there. But this is what he said at the end of it. I'm not happy. I suffer regular flashbacks and nightmares. When I get on a bus, I want to get off at the next stop. Sometimes, when I walk to the local shop, I stop and go back home. You could say that I'm afraid. You'd be right. I'm terrified of going back to prison. I'm terrified that I'm going to be blamed for doing something I haven't done. I'm terrified in being falsely accused again. Do I get angry? Yes. I maintain my calmness through breathing exercises. My physical health is not very good. However, my mental health is very poor. I can't help it. That's how I feel. Now that mirrors an awful lot of people. And as they go through the different phases, it accumulates. And I can only talk to them on the phone between being accused and when they go to court, and then if their case is dropped, they still come back to us because they've got another problem, something that makes them even worse. Because if they've got young children, they want to see their families. They want to be back with the families. But they're not necessarily allowed because social services wants to check them to make sure they're not a danger to the children. Now, the jury has found them not guilty. So why? It's understandable that social services do the checks, but whilst they're doing the checks, they're not allowed interaction necessarily. Until they've done the checks, then the accused has to often go through courses to prove that they're safe to children. As I said at the beginning, just think, how would you react in this situation? What would you think? I mean, that one reading is how that one person felt, but many do, at the different levels. We have here, we've got parents, grandparents who aren't allowed to see their grandchild because their son has been accused. And so because she's being nasty about the son, and the social services don't think that the grandparents, because they're relatives, can protect the child. So the child is with another relative. And now, the grandparents want to go for access, and it's all through court. The only trouble is, the court, they have to pay to go through court. And the grandmother on this particular instance says they've paid 10,000. They haven't got the money. And when people go through court for the legal, if they've got more than the legal aid will allow, they can go through the court procedures by paying out for solicitors. And if they win, do they get that money back? No. They get a percentage, and it has to be done through the solicitors. They only get a percentage of their money. They've been found not guilty. So imagine what that's like. Again, they come to us. What can we do? Where do we go? This is crucifying me. And of course, they're incandescent about the people that have made the false allegation. Because they cannot understand, in some instances, why it's been made. Because it can have happened, the allegation could have happened years ago. And we've got historic problems where somebody is in their 40s now, and oh, it happened to me when I was a baby. Well, not quite a baby, but a toddler. Now, yes, these things need to be investigated, but if the accuser knows all the detail, and the accused, who it's never happened to, can't remember where, when, and what, it's so difficult. So there's not an even-handed remembrance on either side. So the police have to be very careful, and they should be, in actually investigating both the crime, the supposed crime, and the person saying that they're innocent. Another one. The police called at my house. Oh, no, it didn't. Called at my house. I was accused of historical rape, which totally confused me. I actually had consensual sex with this person. I can't eat or sleep at all. I'm in pieces contemplating suicide, as my whole life could be ruined beyond repair. I'm tempted in selling my house on the cheap because he has no money. Another one where he and his wife were accused of harming their 14-month-old child. He tells me they're going through hell. Again, this is another common one. They took him to A&E on the advice of the doctor. The first doctor said, oh, he's got a fracture, it's quite common, you can go home. But then a second doctor decided to look. And then the child was x-rayed, had a body x-ray, and they found, it was a skeletal survey, and they found a few more broken bones. Now, you've heard about this in the press. But a lot of the time, that is an inherited illness, but they don't find it out before social services become involved and take the child. So what they're needed is to investigate before they take the child. They understand why the investigation goes on. They're happy with that. But he's now, the child has now got an interim care order and lives with the auntie up the road. And they don't really know what's going on. They're not really told what's happening. And again, they come to us. We've got a family unit, which is just started up. I mean, I used to do the family unit up until court because my area of expertise is not in the court on the family side. But we've now got experts that have been through the family side court and know what they're talking about. And we're setting up a advocacy service to help parents prepare to go for through social services investigations, to be there to make sure that they're looked at properly. But, as they say, the whole situation is devastating, and they feel as though they're being treated guilty before they're even found guilty. And the last one was a nice 20-year-old. He was accused at 18, and he's been on bail ever since. He's petrified. He's at uni. He had a couple of voluntary jobs, which he was quite high up in and loved doing. He's extremely well supported. He was released under investigation, and the bail extension was denied, but he's still under investigation, and this is 2 years on. He had to take a year off his studies, and he can't face opening up to his family and friends because he says they're sick of it. They don't want to hear it. It gets them upset. So as you see, it's not just the accused, it's the whole family, if they're supporting him. Because sometimes the families are broken down. And just imagine what that's doing to the children and the partner. Because, no, I won't go into that. He had a second police interview, and the statement that was made to him, he's absolutely dumbfounded because he could never go for that, do any such thing. He's saying his entire life is being ruined by this. I'm not coping. I've had all sorts of counselling. Now, he's the only one recently that I've had saying that, including trauma counselling. But none of it has helped. I just don't know how I'm supposed to cope anymore. I can't believe this is allowed to hang over somebody's head for so long. Remember, it's 2 years so far. Nobody understands exactly how it feels. Everybody talks about how I'm not alone. But it's their name on the paper. It's not their name on the paper. It's mine. My entire life has almost been ruined, and I can't seem to find anything enjoyable anymore. I'm scared of what happens. How much longer can I put on a brave face and pretend everything is okay? It's cost me more than anybody else will understand. Relationships, my livelihood, and everything I used to stand by. I feel as though if I'm not the same person as I was back in 2017, I'm absolutely petrified I'll never get back to where I was. The worst part of it was he was named after a family member, and he thinks he's let that family member down. I've tried at long last, but I don't know what to do anymore or where to turn. One of his coaches in one of the organizations suggested coming to FASO. Any help would be gratefully appreciated. And that's where we're at the moment, because he's a recent person. So I haven't asked him yet whether what we do is useful to him. And just talking to us helps. But I've had feedback of many, and they said, if you hadn't been there, we'd have committed suicide. And in fact, one mum phoned me up. What can I do? My son's he's only 15, he's got ADHD. He's a prospective, huge boxer, and he's been in the boxing field for the last 5-6 years. And he's only a young teenager. And after a long period of time being on bail, it was dropped. No explanations. It's dropped. She phoned me back a fortnight later. She'd walked into the bedroom. Her son was hanging there, and he'd been found not guilty. No, he hadn't. He'd had his case dropped. Sorry, get the truth. And just imagine you're in that position. Don't matter whether you're male, female, because if it's you that's been accused, or a member of your family, what are you going to feel? I sniff now and again, sorry. How long is that, John?
You've got 10 minutes left to speak, and then 10 for the Q&A.
Yeah, okay, 10 more. Okay. sorry to ask, because I was speaking earlier this week to the Innocence Project. I don't know if any of you know about the Innocence Project. They're the law students that try and overturn somebody's conviction. No, they don't try and overturn it. They look at the information that they have said is they wanting to have their conviction overturned. So they look and investigate. Because they're students, they've only got a limited time to do it. So their investigations take an awful long time. And they're going through the same thoughts. They're looking at what the legalities are and what legalities have been broken and what have you. And if you look for last October, the Cardiff Innocence Project had their second appeal overturned. They're the only Innocence Project that had that. The reason I keep putting these forward is because I'm local to them, and we've got a separate voluntary group, and at the moment it's families of those convicted of sex offences. Back in sort of up to 2002, it used to be families of those convicted of murders. And in fact, the lead, Dennis Eady, helped overturn about 5 convictions of murder because the evidence was there. And he just helped with pointing out the evidence through to the CCRC, and they had the convictions overturned. And Michael Bryan, who was one of them, Newspaper 3, he made history because in those days, if you'd done a prison sentence and came out, you would then get compensation because the conviction had been overturned. But when he did that, he got his money, and he immediately got a bill for the number of years breakfasts he'd had in prison. And then he fought the police to get compensation off them for wrongful conviction. Now, they said that they haven't done it, but he was paid an unannounced sum, which is often the case. So now he goes round talking about what happened to him in prison. And whilst he was there, he lost a child, he lost his father, because when you're in prison, you can't go to funerals usually, only on certain occasions. So just imagine, your member of family dies. You're not allowed to go to a funeral. How is that going to affect you? You see, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't say that. All I can tell you is what people tell me. And I try to talk to them and explain certain situations. And having been an emergency nurse in the past, I mean, I've been used to emergencies, medical emergencies, so I've had to talk to people to try and calm them. And that's all I do with these. And that's all we can do, because there's nothing set up for any falsely accused person to go to. We're volunteers. We have to live on donations. The government won't pay us because, as I tell everybody, we're a combination, purely for this area, of victim support, Citizens Advice Bureau, and Samaritans, because we fill the function of all those. And because they're charities, they can't deal with this situation because they don't understand it. And that's the thing. People need to understand that the trauma that these unrepresented people are going through. I saw his 5 minutes. I didn't think I would. We're going to have a question and answer session in a minute. I'm happy to answer absolutely anything. I've been doing this job 16 years, or volunteering, and I haven't seen it all, because I say that, and then the next day, it's the same thing but it comes in a different package. And that's how we can tell that people are maintaining innocence, because it's all the same language, but different packages. And the stress is enormous. And even talking about it, as you heard, I get a bit carried away. I get a bit soft. But that's the only way to be. If you're hard, you can't do the job. And so everybody gets a single talk. And when people phone the helpline, if mum and dad phone and son or daughter, each one gets a private conversation. So we're registered with data protection, so everybody has a private conversation. And just to let you know, we've got plethora of paperwork to turn into statistics. We've got 2 years' worth of statistics on the websites. The UWE put that together, but that's the only statistics, apart from academics, a couple of other academics that have put something together. So they put 2 years together, and we've got more than that, but we need funding, or UWE need the funding, to be able to put the rest of it together. And that I need. So I hope that has been useful, and I'm sorry I'm not from your psychiatric side, but thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Margaret. I mean, that's I think you really get across the kind of the depth of despair that a lot of these guys must be going through. How much research is there? By the way, I'm going to do a Q&A for about another 10 minutes. We're not going to have the cameras facing the audience, so your face won't appear. We are recording, but your face won't appear anywhere. And this recording will go on the Men's Psychology YouTube channel.
And mine, hopefully.
And yours, of course, yeah. So, try to feel comfortable to ask any questions that you want to. But if you don't mind me asking,
anything.
How much research is there into, say, for example, the likelihood of somebody falsely accused of a sexual assault becoming depressed or suicidal compared to somebody accused of another type of crime, say theft or...
Currently, to my knowledge, none. It's the hidden, what you don't talk about. Because the police are doing their job, but they're not accountable for it. The social services are doing their job, they're not accountable for it. They don't account for the number of people and what they're accused of. They then account for the number that go into court, and unfortunately people looking at those figures say, well, you've got this wealth of numbers being interviewed, you've got this shortage of people going to court, and then a shortage of being found guilty. There's loads of people getting away with rape, with sex allegations. But there is nothing proper in society that measures it. It's all hyperbole.
So let's take some questions from the audience in that case. Could we start off with this lady over here?
Why is it that you can use bad evidence against the person accused but not the accuser?
Because that's the law, and talk to the Innocence Project at Cardiff Uni, because they're quite high on that. You see, I'm not a lawyer, and I haven't got the time to do all the investigations into that, but I know that that's what happens. So an Innocence Project would be good to have a chat to, you know. So I'm awful sorry, I can't entirely ask that. It's just what happens.
I can maybe help a bit.
Oh, good.
It used to be extremely difficult and used to be inadmissible, but it's been eroded away.
What do you mean?
So bad character evidence used to be inadmissible as part of any trial process. So
That's right.
The idea was that you were supposed to be trialed on any one occasion for the evidence against you at that time, and your previous behaviour was supposed to be irrelevant, but I think over the last 30 years that's just been eroded. I'm not entirely sure for the reasons, but
Yeah, well,
it used to just be
the defence,
anyway.
the defence, it still can't be, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
What was your background then, with you saying?
Oh,
there we are. That's good. Yeah. Well, there we go. He's a bit more good with it.
This lady over here. Oh, sorry, this gentleman here. Sorry.
Thank you so much for the talk. It was very informative, and a lot of thoughts have come to mind. First off, do you mind just giving a brief snapshot of the false allegation network in terms of what you guys do, possibly the demographics, like the people you kind of work with, where you're based, location, geographical-wise, stuff like that?
Right. Head office is my sitting room in South Wales. Can't afford anything else. We cover the UK. So I've got somebody I'm supporting in prison in Ireland, in Scotland, and both Scotland, I have people coming to us to find out, because with Scotland, they've got different law. And it's very difficult trying to figure out what laws they need to know about. And of course, England and Wales, I'm more familiar with that because we live locally. I have 2 other people. No, I've just got another one. I got 3 other people on the helpline, so it's shared. But we're only open 6 till 10 at night because we haven't got. You can't get volunteers to do longer than that. I did a course with the telephone helpline group, and they said that volunteers should not be on a helpline for more than 4 hours. But one of my volunteers recently said, but that's if you're there all day. We might not get a call in one night, but we might get 5 or 6. And we only do it from Monday to Friday. It's very frustrating because I do the office work as well, so I haven't got time to do any more. I've tried to get volunteers outside that don't know anything about false allegations, and it doesn't work, you know. And I've tried to get. I've had 2 law students that volunteered. My problem, I can't delineate everything I've got in my head to be able to give them a proper job that would help them in their careers and also help us. So we've got other people on our committee. So whenever I want to do anything, I ask everybody. And if they don't get back, because they're volunteers, remember, I make my own mind up. But it's with what I know is coming over the helpline. I also attend this other group, and I'm party to British False Memory Society, so I know what they do loosely, and the falsely accused carers and teachers, and I'm a member of that as well, to go and get information, so I'm informed all the time. So I try not to give bad information out. If I don't know, I'll say so. And I also write in for consultations. You've got the government, you've got the police, you've got social services, you've got schools. That's education, sorry. I always get confused. Anyway, whenever they come out with a consultation wanting the responses, moi does that. And I've just got somebody on board now who I'm hoping is going to take that over. But he's got to learn what we're doing first. But, yeah, is that good enough? Yes, it is. Thank you so much. Okay.
Gentleman over here.
That lady.
Oh, sorry, that lady there. I'm terrible at this.
I was just wondering, have you seen a trend in the circumstances of the allegations made?
I'm getting more law students accused of rape.
Right.
And that's an area that really needs looking at. But apart from that, we get them in spates. One, say, 4 weeks, we just get rapes of anybody. My youngest is 8 years old, and my oldest is about 80. So it covers the whole thing. And it doesn't matter what nationality you are. There's one that I haven't mentioned, and that is people marrying foreign brides coming into the country, and within 2 years, they're crying domestic violence, sex abuse against them or the child, so they can get their own green card. Now, it's cost the individual, because I've got both fellas and women, it's cost them an awful lot of money to bring that person in. They thought they were having a proper marriage. It's not the ones they talk about, the false marriages. It's a hidden false marriage, and there's nothing there for them. We've got one African gentleman, he's so incensed with the Home Office. He's a lawyer from back in his own country, and he's actually investigating on how he can address this issue. So he keeps me informed. So I get information from wherever I can. But, yeah, it's very, yeah. And then sometimes it's just family issues, because those family issues can be really devastating. And we've got a group that we work with called Fight Back, and they do, anybody heard of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? Thank you, come on, what's it? Eh? Fine. We've got many parents having their children taken off and being accused of damaging them. And that's why mothers have got together on Facebook and deal with this issue. So when they come through to me, they get referenced and they look after that person on our behalf because they've come our way. And they just talk to others on Facebook, and they're a very supportive group. That's quite recent. But our family lawyer, our family mother that's doing that, that's where she started from. So she's coming from that background. She's academic. They're all academic, believe it or not. She's academic, and she's doing a really good job. You know, it's something we've needed, but I've not had it. So, and there's 2 family organisations as well, Parents Against Injustice and Parents Protecting Children. So if it's damage to children that the accusations are, I tend to put them to PPC, or I have done in the past, and that's Jan, or I've put them to PAIN, Parents Against Injustice, and Alison. And both parents, again, have been through the system. It's only people that have been through the system that know how to give counselling. You know, I've never been to counsel school, but I've done it with my nursing. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm a counsellor for falsely accused.
So there isn't a training course of any kind that people... No? Okay.
No, that's why we're starting trying to start up advocacy service for the family side. But there's no training or anything. There's nobody in your positions to be able to send anybody to. So if they... Well, it's just a national helpline for counsellors, and they're just ordinary counsellors. Nothing's ordinary, but, you know, that's all we can send them to. We need specialists, both family and criminal.
I agree, there's definitely a need for training. So we've time, I think, for 2 more quick questions, and if one of them can be from a psychologist, with maybe a comment or a question, that would be good.
I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a psychotherapist, actually. Might be helpful.
Even
Margaret,
better.
Question I've got. Is this likely, do you think, to be a huge growth area, the area of false abuse, wrongful abuse, allegation of abuse? Because I see on your leaflet here of your organisation that about 120,000 innocent adults are accused every year of this sort of thing.
That was the government that came up with that figure back in 2000.
That's an awful lot of people.
And there is no update on that figure, and I'm sure there's more.
Because the thing I'm aware of, looking at the websites, is that vast amounts of money are being put into rightly supporting victims and asking victims of child sexual abuse to come forward. The one I'm most familiar with is in Lambeth, where there's a very big survivors organisation for some of the children's homes where there have been awful histories and convictions, in fact. But the way it's set up is that the amount of money that's going into supporting that from the the redress scheme, I think there is about £100 million. Now, this is vast amounts of money, and the website there encourages people to come forward, of course, and makes it very easy. And in fact, there's compensation schemes for all sorts of levels, and compensation schemes simply for people who've been in some of those children's homes that have come under the cosh, for a very good reason, I'm sure, going back decades and decades and decades. So it's hard to see how there's not going to be... Well, in fact, they quote on the websites there something like saying, so far there have been a few hundred allegations, and some have been convicted in the courts, I think relatively few numbers, but we're expecting it to go up to 3,000 people in the next few years. So we're making all this money available and inviting people to come forward and make...
That's right.
That's... In a way, the whole culture and society is shifting in the direction, probably for good reason, but of wanting to highlight this and encourage it and facilitate it. Are they?
Well, no, because that was done back in 2000, back end of 1900s and 2000s, when the schools in North Wales were given carte blanche, and the youngsters, it was proven, were trawled to make allegations against the former staff. And it still goes on here and there. And that's where the falsely accused carers and teachers group came from, because they are the ones that were done. They also had one of their number who was a historian, and he put together the history of this trawling. And there was an all-parties group set up, and it was found that on the investigations, it was found that the police had actually trawled for people. And now we've got another APPG doing the same thing, looking at miscarriage of justice, which is brilliant because it's increased over the years. But also, we've just been told it's going to be turned into a commission. So we're hoping that that commission on miscarriage of justice, which covers ours, British false memory, falsely accused carers and teachers, and families of people in prison or even themselves falsely accused. So hopefully we've got that to go. Have any of you heard of Liam Allen? Yeah. Right. Well, Liam Allen has set together to do a justice innovation. If you look on the box, justice innovation, he's got 4 meetings. He's had one in Manchester. The next one is in Cardiff on the 23rd of March. There's supposed to be one in Sheffield. I'm not sure what's happening with that. And the final one's going to be in London. And his ethos is to bring everybody together so that, including police, the law, the lawmakers, bring everybody together. So not fighting each other, just sitting down, looking at the law and saying, although this might be the way it should happen, this is what's actually happening, because nobody is ensuring that that's what's actually happening. So have a look at that, the Innovation for Justice and the APPG. Come and join in, come and see, come and encourage your friends that are going through systems. I bet some of you will know somebody that's already going through this issue. Okay, and FASO, as long as it's falsely accused and it's sex allegations.
Fantastic. I think, okay, time for just one very quick question or comment, but we need to wrap up quite quickly.
Yeah, I'm an expert witness, and I picked up a case where a man was being questionably charged with a sexual offence, and they are querying it and things. But he was actually brought into the forces from the Caribbean, so as soon as he served the sentence, where they are now trying for retrial, they put him in detention centre, and he's risking, and I think he may have even been deported before the trial, case. And his family, and his daughter particularly, desperately fighting to keep him, because he's her father.
That's right.
And
Well,
the
as long
Home
as they've
Office
got a
are
good-
not even paying attention.
No, they don't.
So this is additional kind of trauma.
That's right.
going
Have
on.
they got a good solicitor? Because there's a couple of good ones in London that deal with that issue.
Oh, is there? Oh,
There's a few,
yeah.
you know.
But the Home Office don't seem to be paying attention.
Oh, no,
They'll
no,
just-
no. Well,
just-
they don't pay attention
Yeah.
for the brides that are coming in or the husbands that are coming in. And then, strangely enough, within 2 years or shortly after, making allegations against the partner to get their own way. And if you look at the website for those coming in to marry, it says right up there in front, if you are suffering domestic violence, you can do this and get this. Not a balance to say, if you have if you are being falsely accused of this, we will listen to you. I know the law's got to go its own way, but the Home Office needs to have a post for people in that position so that they can listen to them.
I do think you need to be careful not to insinuate, though, that somebody coming to this country is going to make false
Oh,
accusations.
no, I'm not insinuating that, love. I said some.
I think by the same token, the kind of man that might buy a wife might be the kind of man that might beat a wife. So I do
Right,
think
they're
that
not-
we can go both ways there.
Right, they're not buying.
They're paying to bring a woman over to this country.
The only reason they're paying is because there's no other way. Some of them have got married abroad.
Yeah, I don't want to argue
no,
about
no,
it.
I know.
I just think that you need to
Probably
be
hold
careful about how
web
you...
forums dedicated to
Okay,
this particular
yeah.
question. But it sounds like you're really talking about a massive problem here, a systemic problem.
But thank you for coming up with that to make sure that I'm... No, that's good. No, you need to. I'm not academic, so the arguments are a bit beyond me.
Well, I mean, academics should be getting involved and kind of going through the arguments themselves. But it sounds like that there's just a huge problem that's being overlooked. That there's not even any proper training available, really, and people like yourself and your volunteers are doing an excellent job. Liam Allen too, he's doing great things, bring people together to really look carefully and kind of open their eyes and use their common sense and deal with what's going on. But what we're going to do, I think probably a lot of people will want to contact you and find out further information. So what we'll do is put on, at the end of the YouTube video, and brilliant, you've got some leaflets here. So people
Sat down all day updating them.
Great, excellent, thanks. So people can find out some more about this, and maybe so you might find that people want to help in some way, which I really hope happens. But for now, thanks so much, Margaret, for coming and speaking so eloquently about this issue. Really, really grateful for you taking the time to do so. So please, warm round of applause.